who are learning engineers? Um, these are the people who come along, and I'd say, as opposed to, again, say a learning scientist who might be much more interested in saying, well, I want to understand, again, sort of fundamentally, what does it mean for people to learn? How do people learn? How do people learn in classrooms? How do people learn in museum spaces? How do people learn with families? That's one set of questions or kind of people. Learning engineers are more likely to say, knowing that stuff that learning scientists bring, how do I think about leading the next generation of educational technologies, for instance? How can we develop new online or hybrid or active learning environments or maker spaces where we engage people in learning through design of physical objects? How do we create new technological curriculum, technology enhanced curriculum, and new pedagogies, new assessment methods? How do we do employee training? So a lot of people who are learning engineers will work in corporate education for companies, trying to think about how to reskill and upskill employees. And learning engineers may be people who build after school and community programs, doing a lot of work sort of outside of the sort of rules and the ways that schools work. You'll see a lot of job titles, and I think it's important. One of the things that we will sort of always have in the back of our head when we're studying and you're in your classes is that you want to be employable when you're done. You'll notice there's a lot of different job titles if you started to look around in this field. Learning engineer, again, is a relatively new term. You're more likely to see people called learning experience designers. Often user experience designers are involved in doing this kind of work of trying to design new learning environments for people. Instructional design is one of the older incarnations of one of the original fields that really thought about how do you build environments for training in particular, but also for education. And so we'll see a little bit of instructional design in your curriculum. I think learning engineering brings new rules, new processes to the game. Curriculum developers, educational technology consultants, again, all titles that you might see if you were looking for jobs. As for employers, I like to think that the people who employ learning engineers are people who have organizations. They're somewhere in some organizational structure where people learn, which tends to be almost every organization. So you can think about it as learning engineers work in schools or colleges or universities. That's kind of the obvious suspect. And it's an important one. But they would also be hired by museums and zoos, aquariums, people who are the people who are building exhibits in museums, for instance, are likely learning engineers of some sort. Businesses, again, thinking about corporate, maybe startups or large corporations and the kind of education they need to keep their employees up to date. Nonprofits, foundations, social service, community agencies. Again, any organization where people learn will ultimately need learning engineers. So the job titles, the employers, they're out there, the jobs are out there. And this is becoming much more important as the world changes. And with that, let me just say, why do we need learning engineers? Because the world is constantly changing. And I think that's no more obvious than in this year of 2020, where so much is changing so fast. And certainly within weeks, the entire education system globally changed, literally within a matter of weeks. So why do we need learning engineers? Let me give you an example. This is something I pulled just today. This is April, second week of April. So here is a news story. It's a wonderful news story. It's about students at a university in New Mexico helping local cultural centers put their museum collections online, offering a free month of emergency cultural services to help create virtual tours, podcasts, websites, and online collections. So those are great things to do because remember, this is April of 2020 and everything is closed, but learning still has to happen. So how are we going to do it? Well, this is a great idea. You take a Museum of Art and a Museum of International Folk Art, National Hispanic Cultural Center, and you put them online. Now, the first question you have to think about when you do that is, how are you going to translate face-to-face museum visits to these obviously very rich cultural centers. How do you make those into compelling online learning experiences? And I want to stress compelling here because you could simply say, I'm going to put content, pictures of content on a website, and there it is. And here's a caption to describe what that object is, and we're done. And no one's going to go to that website. So you got to think, how do we make compelling experiences, whether they're online or face-to-face? In this case, it really is a question of, and I would say the most important thing, the biggest problem that probably we've been facing in April 2020 is the problem of how do we make all of the stuff that used to be face-to-face into online. How do you scale the approach? So they're working with 3 museums right now. How would you make that work with 6 museums? How do you make it work with 10 museums? How do you make it work with 100, 1,000 museums? What are the design patterns that you can take away from working with 3 that you can start to build up and you can reuse and scale? How do you know if those patterns, how do you know if your approach works? How do you know if people are actually engaged and they're actually learning what you'd like them to learn, right? So we have to think about not only how to do the design of interesting experiences, but also how to assess them. And then finally, how do you design for equity and inclusion? So there are going to be some people who have gigabit wireless connections into their homes and other people who don't. And if you want to make sure that all of those materials, all of that great content that's in those museums, all of those great opportunities are made available to everyone, you might need to do several different designs based on one larger universal theme. So equity and inclusion is important. So that's why we need learning engineers. And again, I want to say, if you think about the world right now, everything about how we learn and where we learn in particular has changed. And likely on the other end of this, when everything is so-called normal again, we may see still see a dramatic change in the way that we learn and where we learn and how we learn. And it's the job of learning engineers to make sure that we do that the right way. So that's what you're going to learn. You're going to learn a little bit about how people learn and what influences their engagement. And again, I want to come back to this idea of compelling or engaging or having experiences that make people that are awesome, that make people go like, wow, I am absolutely in awe of that thing that you just made me do in a museum or in a classroom. You'll learn about learner-centered design. So it's important when you're doing this kind of work, not just to design. Sometimes we want to design things so that it's easy for humans, for people. Other times we want to have a little bit of challenge because that challenge is how people learn. So what does it mean to do learner-centered design and to what is the process by which you sort of do that and how do you assess that? A big part of this program, and it's certainly a big thrust of what it means to do this program at Boston College, is designing for diversity, for social justice and equity. Again, all people do not have the same access to opportunities for, and so trying to understand how to design so that everybody is able to do and engage in certain kinds of learning is an important piece here. Then I think besides the skills of being a learning engineer, we want to make sure, one, that you are ready for a career. So we're going to make sure that there are opportunities for you to engage in that. 2, we want to, you will be a leader, and in several ways. 1, you will be a leader of teams as you go into organizations or schools or wherever you happen to work. You will likely lead teams to do this kind of learning engineering work. Secondly, you will be a leader because you will be one of the first in this field to really go out into the world. And we hope that you'll be an advocate for the field and really to demonstrate the importance of learning engineering. Students will graduate. That's all of you will have a portfolio that will showcase your abilities at the end. Experiential learning is a big part of the program. So it's very important. We are going to help you find relationships with local companies. They might be local in the sense of face-to-face. They may be local in the sense of being just a double click away in Zoom or a Google Hangout. But we want our students, and you will have opportunities to compete in real-world design challenges, to shadow professionals, to visit technology incubators, to actually participate in internships with design teams. So this experiential sense, it's not just things. It's not, you're not going to just do learning engineering in the classroom. We want you to see what it's like to do it in the real world, and to follow experts, and to see the opportunities that you can have. And so there's multiple touch points where you will be able to do that. This is kind of the program of study. It is a form that you'll eventually fill out with advising at the college. And let me just sort of blow this up and give you sort of a bigger sense of, right, not necessarily line by line, but sort of the big picture of things. The program of study works a little bit like this, right? This is a 1-year full-time master's program. You begin with the introduction to learning engineering, where we overview a lot of what is this field about? Again, who does it? Why do you care? Who are the key players? What are the key core theoretical ideas? And each term you do a design studio and a reflective seminar. What those are is essentially this: design studios where you do, reflective seminar obviously was where you reflect on doing. Design studios where you go in and you say, let's find a problem to solve. Here's a group of people, and they need to know a particular set of skills. They need to have exposure to some kind of curriculum, whatever it is, some knowledge, some facts, whatever the particular problem is. And then you build solutions. So you start to build prototypes, small examples of what it might be to learn in this area, and you iterate through that until you come up with a solution. The reflective seminar is where you think about, is it working? What works, what doesn't work? And am I reaching the goals? Am I actually sort of connecting to the kinds of learning that I would like people to what do I want to see? You have a set of modules. The modules are essentially, again, digging deeper into theories about how people learn. So you will learn things, observing designs in use. How do you watch and assess your designs in the real world? Cognitive task analysis is about how do you think, how do you break down a problem in terms of what people need to do, how they need to think in order to solve problems. So a lot of modules there. Again, that's sort of your learning sciences theoretical background. And then a set of electives that allow you to specialize a little bit. So if you're interested in early childhood or adolescent or special needs, you might take electives there. If you are, like myself, a technologist, you might say, I want to take more courses that help me understand, how can I use virtual reality or social media or games to teach people. And then free electives, you may also sort of choose to do things. I want to take the learning engineering skills I have, and I want to think about those in relationship to management or entrepreneurship or other areas. So there's some freedom on the elective side to kind of specialize your degree, but really, again, the core of this is design studio, reflective seminar, learning engineer, complemented by electives, and then also these modules, smaller modules on how people learn. That's essentially the program. I want to thank you again for applying to the program. I want to congratulate you again for being accepted to the program. I do hope you will join us in the fall. Again, I'll be starting in July. And I want to stress again, the reason I'm doing this is because I'm extremely excited about being part of this program. I'm extremely excited about working with all of you and to being in studios with you, to work and learn with you to build the next generation of learning environments. I want to thank you again. If you have any questions, please, you can reach out to the college, but also my email there, b.smith@bc.edu. Thanks very much. Have a great day.